When you hear the word audit, your mind probably jumps to these massive, sprawling corporations, right? But what about that local bakery on the corner? Or your favorite charity? Well, they get audited too. And for them, the rule book can look completely different. So today, we're going to break down the special playbook for these smaller but absolutely vital organizations.
All right, so this flowchart right here from an ACCA study text, this is going to be our guide. It perfectly lays out all the unique twists and turns of auditing smaller entities, and we are going to walk through it piece by piece.
So, the big question is, why? Why can't we just use a one-size-fits-all approach for every audit? What makes these smaller businesses and nonprofits so special? Well, it's about way more than just their size. It's really about their unique structure, their purpose, and, of course, their risks. Okay, let's dive right in with our first section, the Small Entity Challenge. This is where we get to the bottom of the fundamental characteristics that make these audits a whole different ballgame. First off, their size. In a small entity, systems are usually pretty informal. Forget about multi-layered approval processes and complex paperwork. Things get done on the fly. And what does that mean for an auditor? It means the typical paper trail they rely on can be really thin, or maybe it doesn't even exist. So the auditor has to shift gears and rely way more on just watching how things work and actually talking to people. Next up is something called segregation of duties. This one is huge. In a big company, you have one person buying stuff, another person recording it, and a third person paying for it. It's all separate. But in a small business, so often it's the very same person doing all three of those things. That concentration of power is a major, major risk for mistakes or even fraud, simply because there's no second pair of eyes to catch it. And that leads us right into one of the biggest challenges of all, the dominant owner. Auditors have a term for this, management override. See, you can have controls in place, but if a single owner wants to, they can just decide to bypass them. It's a massive risk that auditors have to deal with head-on, always asking themselves, is the person in charge playing by the very rules they set for everyone else? Okay, so with all these unique risks floating around, where does an auditor even start? Well, you can't just jump in. Let's take a look at the essential groundwork that has to be laid to set the audit up for success. It really starts with two key steps. First, the auditor has to formally confirm that they can even accept the job. They've got to make sure they have the right skills and are confident they can find enough evidence. Then they issue what's called an engagement letter. Think of it as the official contract. It lays out the scope, the responsibilities, everything. It just makes sure everybody is on the same page from day one. The contract is signed, the groundwork is laid, now it's game time. This is where the auditor starts to design their strategic approach, their actual game plan for gathering evidence and tackling all those risks we just talked about. Now, an auditor has this whole toolkit of procedures, from assessing risks to doing super detailed testing. They call that substantive procedures. It's about digging into specific transactions. But for these smaller guys, a couple of these tools are absolutely crucial. So let's zoom in on those. First up, written representations. So what is this? It's basically a formal letter where management puts key information down in writing and signs it. For instance, they might state that they've told the auditor about every single legal issue, or that they truly believe the company is going to be okay for the next year. In a place with very little formal documentation, getting this kind of signed statement from the owner is a really vital piece of the puzzle. And then we have analytical procedures. This is where the auditor really gets to put on their detective hat. They're looking for trends and relationships that just don't make sense. If a restaurant's sales suddenly double, but their food costs stay exactly the same, that's a huge red flag an auditor is going to investigate. It's all about using logic and looking at the big picture to spot problems that need a much deeper dive. All right, let's switch gears and talk about a really special case, not-for-profits. Because when an organization's main goal isn't to make money, the whole audit game changes. The key difference really boils down to purpose. A business exists to generate profit for its owners. Simple. But a not-for-profit exists to advance a mission or a cause. That totally flips the script for the auditor. The focus shifts from, are the profits stated correctly, to, was the money actually spent on the mission? It becomes a question of responsibility to donors, not just shareholders. And not-for-profit is a really broad category, so the audit approach has to be tailored. For an organization that runs on grants, the auditor is going to spend a ton of time checking if they followed the grant's specific and often very complex rules. For a membership club, they'll be focused on making sure all the subscription money was collected.
And for a public charity, the auditors got to zero in on how cash donations are handled and making sure those funds are used for the cause they were given for. So, if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's that auditing is definitely not a one-size-fits-all kind of deal. It's a dynamic process that demands critical thinking and the ability to adapt to the unique character of every single organization, whether their goal is making a profit or making a difference. Which leaves us with a final thought to chew on. When one person completely runs the show with all the power in their hands, where does an auditor even begin to look for the truth? That's not just a question. That's the art and the challenge of the audit itself.